Hi, Brendan. Welcome back to SUP FM.
Hey, awesome. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Simon. Always a pleasure.
Well, hopefully it is. I mean, it's your third appearance now, and officially, if you've made your third appearance, then we have to legally adopt you. So you're joining a crew, a select crew of Sarah Sup Junkie Thornley and April Zilg. So we didn't mention that before the recording, but just so you know, you're now legally adopted. Um,
Cool.
and to introduce you, people in the SUP world should know you very well by now, but you appeared in a couple of previous episodes. So, episode 58, which was just before you set out on your trip around Britain, and episode 80, where you had just returned from your trip around Britain. And in those episodes, we talk about your story. Obviously, the circumnavigation and some of your adventures, and also the water safety charity Above Water, which you founded, obviously following a tragic situation that you found yourself in the middle of a beach in the UK. But this is a bonus episode and driven very much by events, because there's a number of new format racing events which are starting to emerge in the SUP world on both sides of the Atlantic. Back in December, there was Last Paddler Standing competition, which you took part in. And over here on Saturday, the 1st of April, we've got a brand new event down in your local water in the beautiful clear waters of Torbay, which is SUP 12. And the date for that is approaching very rapidly. So I wanted to talk about these new challenges, your experience competing, your event, obviously. But before we get to that, the world of Brendon Prince hasn't stopped since our last conversation. I don't think we've talked on the show about your film, and also the shower of awards and recognition which has been heading in your direction, over the last sort of year or so, and various other adventures that you've been on. So if you're happy, we'll bring things up to date, and then we'll talk a bit about the racing. Does that sound
Awesome.
like a plan?
Sounds
Fantastic.
like a great plan.
Excellent. So let's take the film first of all. So your film is Circumnavigate, directed and shot by Will Redaway, and it's been shown across the UK at a number of events since its release. And it's a stunning bit of filmmaking, absolutely spectacular, very moving, and you really feel like we're there on the adventure with you. And I know it took a huge amount of effort to sort of put together, particularly Will, who spent a large proportion of the trip with you. So could you just talk a little bit about the film? And particularly, I'm interested in that first showing, because you must have seen it in advance. But what was it like to sit down there with a whole bunch of other people and watch it through for the first time?
Well, yeah, thank you. There's some lovely comments you made in there. So Will put this film together, and he's never put a feature film together, and I had no understanding of the work that's involved in that. And I just did the paddling bit. He's done all of this amazing work, and he's put together, for his first film, something quite amazing. And consequently, it's won lots of awards and is in the process of winning. I mean, I didn't realize that these sort of things take 2 or 3 years after the activity to really do the rounds and get out there. And so, yeah, I mean, to win the SUP award for paddler, North American Paddling magazine, that's just it really does add magnitude to it, and gives great great further vision and further coverage of all the reason why I did it in the first place. But yeah, what you said about the first time I watched it, it's a very weird thing watching something that someone has made about you, with you in it. No doubt about it. And I haven't watched it many times, so I mean, I've taken it around the country, and I did however many number of shows, I don't know, but I've only watched it 2 or 3 times fully,
Mm-hmm.
just because it's a bit cringy watching yourself, isn't it? A bit cringy. But what's lovely, because the feature is an hour and a half, and for the festival, so for all the awards, you have to cut it down, and the max is 40 minutes. So the festival version is 39 minutes. And Will's done such an amazing job of, I can watch and think, well, what has he cut out? What, because you don't feel like you've missed anything on the shorter one. But yeah, just really proud of his work, and for me, it just really does catalogue it as well. So that's a joyous thing that one day I'll be sitting down with grandchildren and saying, "Oi, come and watch this for the 10th time."
Absolutely, and as you say, it's beautiful. It's very, very cinematic, and it really shows off the incredible landscapes and the coastlines that you paddled on. I do hope that he hasn't cut out the half a second of me and you paddling around near the Needles, just ahead of the closing credits, because I've watched that more than a couple of times, I've got to confess, mostly to sort of point at myself and point that out to my wife. But no, it's a fantastic film, and it's obviously done the tour of the adventure festivals and so on. What are the plans in terms of a more general release? So it's not available yet, is it?
Yeah, it's not available. So we've got one more show, one more public show, which will be the last one in Torbay on the 13th of April. So there's still a few tickets available for that, and that will be a Q&A with myself and Will as well. And then we've got a private show stroke public show, which is a bit of an exclusive for you because it will be on the GB SUP series when it's in Cardiff. We're going to show it after the Cardiff event, so that'll be really cool. And again, I'll be there for a Q&A on that. And then it goes to what we're trying to sort out is how it generally releases. So there are different platforms that can happen on, and it just means that anybody anywhere can get hold of it and watch it for a very small fee.
Excellent. So if you're listening, Netflix, negotiations can start now, possibly. Discovery Channel,
Netflix, Discovery, Disney Plus. That's we're all trying to work out. It's
whole 9 yards.
It's a whole different ball game, all on that stuff. But we just want to get it out there, and in doing that, what was lovely when it was with because it went round with the Ocean Film Festival, is sometimes in busy life you didn't realise that it was being shown, let's say in Edinburgh, and then all of a sudden you start getting all these messages at 11 o'clock at night because these people have just watched it, and that's lovely. That really is lovely, and it spurs you on for the next day for sure.
Amazing. And you added a bit to your circumnavigation, didn't you? Because you spent a bit of time in Northern Ireland paddling there. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, well, obviously I did the mainland UK, which was stunning and was the main focus. But I always wanted to do Northern Ireland, and the idea was to try and paddle across, because that's the North Channel is something I will do for sure. I've always looked at that as a nice crossing to do, but it didn't work out at all when I was at in that region when I was there because the weather was so bad. So I had to come back and do it, and I loved paddling Northern Ireland. It is fabulous bit of coastline. It has amazing people, and I've said this before, but it really is all the good bits that you have in the UK. The big beaches, the massive cliffs, the exposed paddling, the fast flow, big standing waves, all these amazing bits, wildlife galore, are all condensed into that 300 kilometers in Northern Ireland. They really are. So if you ever, thinking, oh, wow, where could I go for a few days paddling? Don't write off Northern Ireland. It's a great place to go and paddle.
Fabulous. And I mentioned about the awards and so on. I noticed that the most recent award came direct from the Prime Minister with a handwritten note, no doubt, which is the Points of Light Award. That's a pretty substantial piece of recognition.
Yeah, do you know what? I with all the awards, and I'll tell you about one in a second that I had yesterday. They're all very special. They're all very special, and they, whatever your political view is, to get something from your Prime Minister is a lovely gesture, and it just means that certain people in important places are realising the work we do with the charity and the work we're doing because of the paddling and using stand-up paddleboarding as this medium to talk and get people talking about water safety. It has its purpose and is doing its job. It's doing its job. I just say yesterday I went into a school and did some motivational talks and lots of water safety training. And this little year 9 girl came up to me at the end of it and said, very well spoken young lady, above her years by a long way. I certainly was nothing like that when I was year 9, was that 13? And she just said, good people come into your life, and when good people come into your life, they're like butterflies come into your life. So I've made you this butterfly. And I kid you not, I
Oh,
got it, and it just blew me away. Blew me away.
wow.
So, you know, there's little things like that that motivate you for months to come
Yeah.
and get you out on the board when it is as minging as it is out there today.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. Yeah, and yeah, it's those little touches, isn't it, that really makes a difference. And in the points of life, in the points of light nomination, it said it obviously pulled out your work with water safety, and said that you'd visited over 5,000 schools to give advice and education. I mean, the numbers are quite phenomenal, and really, it is a massive testament to your passion, which obviously we know, what drove that. But fantastic achievement, Brendon. So on behalf of
Well,
the SUP community, you've really planted the flag in terms of achievement on that.
well, that's very kind of you to say, but do you know what? Until we've got next to zero accidental drowning in this country, it's not good enough, and we need to do as much as we can
Mm-hmm.
because they're accidents, and
Mm.
we can do something about this. And you know, I go into places and speak to children all around the country and teachers and parents, and I'm blown away how amazing their knowledge is sometimes, and I'm also blown away just how naive they are. Um, they know nothing, you know,
Mm.
and that's the general, and we don't realize that we need to know it until you need to know it. And that's
Yeah.
that's the thing with water safety. Happens at the best times because you're on holiday, you're with your mates, you're having fun, and all of a sudden something goes wrong and no one knows what to do. And it's not rocket science. That's the thing. It's not rocket science. So, yeah, we keep flying the flag, keep doing it.
Yeah, absolutely, and we've obviously spoken since the podcast. We've been part of the RNLI working group around safety, and I think obviously as we start a new season, and that there are still plenty of things to do in that area, and look forward to working with you on that, because I think as you say, the messages, particularly for SUP safety, I think are fairly simple. We don't need to make it too complex, but it's engaging with the the people who've joined the sport recently, who have bought their paddle boards from sort of non-traditional water sports outlets, the supermarkets and the online retailers, who I think we really need to focus on in order to get those really basic messages across to.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and on one hand, I absolutely love that because it gives access to our amazing waters for people. But of course, you know, that's where a lot of the problems are coming. And again,
Mm,
those people don't need to know. They don't think they need to know until it's kind of too late. And yeah, it's getting in to be able to, because a lot of the channels we work in and talk in, we're speaking to people that know all this.
yeah.
It's getting into the channels where they really don't know it, and just helping them to understand. We just want them to have the best time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's just convincing them they need to know it, really.
100%. I think we need a communication strategy, and as I said, I think there's some fairly sort of targeted messages that we can put out there to help people. Without getting on my soapbox too early, I think that there are three major things which are sort of risk to life. We've got wind, so the offshore wind, the number of RNLI rescues from people not understanding the risks of that were phenomenal all the way through the last season. You've got cold water, which is always a real killer in the summer. And of course, we've got water flow, which we know from leash snagging and weir incidents and all sorts. So anytime when there's water flowing quickly, there's a danger. Obviously there are other dangers as well, but in terms of the most immediate ones, I think that would be a good lump to start with. Just simple messages to identify these, and ultimately that the difficulty about all of those is that the dangers are invisible. Unless you're actually out there and in it, you're not going to realize that there's a risk factor. So you'd stand there, if you don't know, you wouldn't recognize the risk.
Yeah, no, that's it. And helping people to understand that if they use their paddleboard like a paddle beach toy, then and stay within 50 meters, let's say, of the coast, it's a very different experience than those that I come across a lot, because they want to adventure, but they're never used to adventuring on a paddleboard. They want to go around the corner. And the conditions when you go around a headland, as are very different, and they're the issues we have in the bay a lot. It's those people who are, right, what can I do next on my paddleboard? Because I've seen, and that's why this year my paddling is all about adventure SUP and showing as many people what it's like to go around the corner, what it's like to go around the headland, the difference that it is, and all the points that you made about flow, conditions, water temperature, bringing all that in is a big drive for this year on the board for me.
Excellent. Right. Well, let's move on to these endurance events, obviously culminating with SUP 12. But before we get to that, I mean, it is a new concept, these sort of ultra time-based events. And you were invited out to Florida, weren't you, in December to take part in Last Paddler Standing, which, I watched a large proportion of it on TV. It was quite an event. I mean, it felt like it felt like a season of Netflix. I know other people have sort of mentioned that as well, but you really got to meet all of the competitors and get to know a lot about some of the presenters on there as well. Just tell us a bit about that whole experience, because that was proper hardcore.
Yeah, I mean, you go out there with an open mind of what it's going to be like, and I suppose like anybody who does their first event, you go there to just lap it all up and work it out, and we were all there doing that the exact thing, really, because you didn't really know. I'm not used to paddling in Florida, and it's they've got their conditions, that the way the winds kick in mid-morning, the way the light is, the way the heat is, the way that all the things that necessarily you're not used to in your own sort of environment. Great bunch of paddlers, great bunch of people supporting on a really cool kind of lake. To kind of picture it, it's a bit like having where's a really big shopping centre in this country?
Thurrock.
Right, Thurrock. Yeah, there you go. So imagine having a massive lake next to Thurrock, and you're paddling, and the sun is, and it's 34 degrees. So it's a lovely place with all this shopping going on next to you, and things to see and watch, and there's a highway as well, and it's all very American. And there are alligators, and there are snakes, and there are all things like that to kind of keep you on your toes. But at the same time, you're just trying to focus to paddle every hour. And those hours come around very quickly. They really do.
So tell us about the format then. How did the format work? It was basically you start and then
you all start together, and you just paddle your 5 and a bit K loop, which for me, I'd practiced for months beforehand and worked out for me that 43 minutes. If I did 43 minutes, it wasn't too much effort to do that 5.3K loop in that time, but also it wasn't too slow. So I had a little break. And for the first 12 laps, I was literally within 10 seconds of 43 minutes every time. So I was really happy with that. But I'm used to paddling and not stopping, and those stops are brutal. They do things to you that you don't want them to. You think you're going to rest, but actually it's not very pleasant. And I know how different I'm going to do it next time. It's so completely different. because the rest is not always a good thing.
Mm.
Because you're not massively exerting yourself when you're paddling. So you've got kind of rest there. Saying that, there are times of the day where the winds kick in, where it's brutal, proper in your
Mm.
face winds, which then never seem to be on your back. The other side. And also little things like you just don't experience. I didn't really know, like the sun goes down, and for that kind of twilight hour, the mosquitoes are there. You can't even see the water. It's so thick. You're paddling through them, and you're thinking, "Crikey, they're going to be eaten alive." But I mean, I wasn't bitten once, so I don't know if there's some sort of special, or perhaps I was so stinky, but then they weren't interested. But then they all just disappear. Within an hour, 45 minutes, they're all gone,
Mm.
and you're left then to paddle in the night, which is, Florida nights are very warm, uh, warm breeze. As long as you're used to seeing the eyes
Mm.
looking back at you in the water, you get used to that in the end. And you
Wow.
also, it spurs you along because you don't want to be at the back. You don't want to be the
Mm.
last one, because I think the last one's the one that gets picked off by the alligator, isn't it?
Oh, there you go. So the format is on that one. So you all start together. You've got an hour to do your circuit round, and then you stop. And then at the start of the next hour, you head out again, and you just keep on going until the last person gives up. So you gave it a pretty good wriggle on that, didn't you? I mean, I think you ended on, what was it, 19
Yeah, I did
circuits?
19, which I was gutted about. I hadn't handled the heat well, and it had come back to bite me on the arse. So I was disappointed, and that's definitely why I'm going back next year, because I need to fulfill my potential, and that potential not necessarily is to win, but I know I can do 48 hours. I've done 48 hours before, so I want to do 48 hours in that
Mm.
environment. And what's lovely is obviously the further you get into it, the team work between everybody to spur each other on, and
Mm.
that was really shown at the end, obviously, where if Pablo had to have done another lap, he would have had
Mm.
to jump up the distance, and to do the next distance would be brutal, and it shows that the event wouldn't last many more hours after 48.
Mm.
In 10 years time, we might have someone who does 50,
Mm.
52, 53 laps, but I can't imagine any more than that, really. I really
No,
can't.
I mean that was quite an event. So Paolo Marconi won 48 hours. He finished in, and John Nippers sort of just obviously gave up. I think the thing before, but Paolo's competed on the tour. John is paddles around with his dog. So it was it is a bit of a leveler, isn't it? It's all about the mind, really, and just keeping going. And it obviously it's quite a sort of democratic type of event there.
Yeah, and I mean, Kippers, just the focus that he had to keep going, and both those guys were on inflatables, so there's a big up there for inflatables in that environment where the water is so calm, and it didn't really get choppy, it just gets a bit wind brushed, but there's a lot to be said for those guys,
Mm.
because half the field were traveled quite a way to get there, whether it be across America or across the Atlantic. So obviously, ISUPs were the thing to do. I was very fortunate that SIC got me aboard over there. Um, but yeah, I think we'll see just as many, if not more, ISUPs this year competing, because people need a board to travel with.
So that was last year. That was December, and very very unique event. And we're building towards our version in the UK. As I mentioned, it's Saturday, the 1st of April, and it's organised by yourself in your local waters. So, how would you describe SUP 12 in terms of format?
Well, I love to keep things simple. So all you got to do is paddle a lap as many times as you can in 12 hours. It's that simple. What does that mean to some people? It might mean they get 6 laps done. It might mean they get 30 laps done. But I've made it so that you have to paddle the loop, and it's a pretty loop. Takes in the sort of Torquay corner of Torbay. So it goes along the promenades. There's lots of places for people to be able to literally walk with you as you're racing. Then it goes out as though it's heading off towards Brixham, and then comes back into Torquay. So, occasionally we get little waves in that corner, and that would mean that you might be surfing in. But we're talking 2 or 3 foot max. It doesn't get any bigger than that at all. And 90% of the time it's pan flat. But it does mean that every lap that you do, you have to come in. So you can either leave your board or just bring it up, but we'll have people there taking your boards from you to hold them for you. And then you have to run over the mat or walk over the mat and then go back onto the board. Now that 20 or 30 meter walk, you will walk by your rest station, your area that you've set up. So the temptation to go, I just have a drink, because you're not allowed to eat on the board at all. I'll just have something to eat. I'll just do, and that 1 minute stop turns into a 5 minute stop. You add those over 12 hours, and that's another couple of laps that you could have done. So I want to play with people's mind, and I want to see those people that are like, no, I'm doing 10 laps before I have a break or think about food or not, and see how people do the whole stops. A bit like pit stops in a Grand Prix. You've got to be tactical. You've got to think about how you're going to do it to last the full 12 hours.
I mean, it's a huge strategic exercise. So obviously you've got the stops there, you've got the eating and the drinking. By the way, is Camelback's okay?
Yes, you can take liquid with you,
okay.
But no food.
Right, okay. So it's an ultra distance race, could be it's part time trial there, and there's a lot of strategic elements to it, particularly around the water, which obviously so well. So starting at 7 o'clock, obviously the sun will be up by that time, and I think when it finishes at 7, it will be just after sort of sunset, or the sun would be setting. So there's all sorts of considerations. There's the wind direction, there's you going through the full cycle of tides in there. How tidal is it, and how much will that affect things?
Yeah, so as far as flow's concerned, there's very little flow. On a spring tide, there would be half a knot of flow at best. But with neap tides, so you won't even feel any flow. But there will be a difference in the height of the tide. So it drops 2.5, 3 meters, which just exposes the beach, really. But what we've got there, if the conditions are right, you will experience kind of the full circle of what can be created on a coastal environment on a day. So if it's a sunny day, that would be a glorious morning and it'll be a glorious evening, but we're going to get some winds in there at some stage. So you're going to need to, with the best of conditions, there's going to be a little bit of wind that we're either going to be paddling into or on your back. If there was a little bit of swell, that would be fabulous. To have a little ripple where people can actually surf that last sort of 50, 100 meters in would be, again, a great spectacle for us all to see.
And with a sort of standard southwesterly, how do you encounter that on the course? I mean, it's pretty sheltered, isn't it, down the Brixham side?
Yeah, that's it. So that comes across the bay, basically, and goes into our corner. So that, on a strong southwesterly, we'll get some ripples. I mean, we've had that today, and it's just ripples. It's nothing more than that. It stops any waves, which is really annoying. So but anything else, anything from the north, just means that it's totally sheltered, and it would be absolutely pan flat.
Well, I warned you ahead of time that I've got a couple of zingers from Sarah, SUP Junkie Thornley. Okay, so you ready and prepared for this?
Okay, here goes.
Fasten your seatbelts. So, are you competing, Brendon, in the SUP 12?
Possibly. I want to. I'm training to, but I've organised lots of events before, and it's very rare that you can get it absolutely nailed with everybody doing the thing, that you don't need to be present. And also there is an element of me that that if I'm competing, I will miss all the engagement and stuff because we've got lots of other stuff going on there as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big part of me that wants to race and do it, but there's also a huge part that says, don't be so ridiculous, stay on land. So what I might do is do it and just sort of see how many laps I do and give that as a bit of a, how many of you can beat it type thing. But all depends on time.
Okay, well, this is a question from me, which is reflecting on last paddler standing. What would you do differently training for this event?
So with last paddle standing, I trained for endurance. So I was doing I kind of set it up for 12 hours so that I non-stop paddle for 4 hours, 20-minute break, non-stop paddle for 4 hours, 20-minute break. And I can keep doing that for the 16, so four sessions. For last paddler standing, you can't really do that because when you paddle for 4 hours, you get into a real routine and rhythm, and you absolutely, but that break at 43 minutes, 45 minutes, however long it takes you to do, wrecks that. So it's interval training. It really has to be interval training, and that's what I'm going to do for last paddler standing this time. And likewise for SUP 12, I'm doing a lot more interval training. So up in the intensity, and then it breaks every hour. Which is a different dynamics to adventure paddling, where you're off paddling for days on end.
I don't know whether you caught any of the episodes with April Zilg, but she was quite interesting around heart rate training and just that low intensity, spending that time doing more and more time at that very low intensity, which is almost at sort of conversational pace, in order to sort of build up your reserves. I would imagine that would be a sort of a fairly good approach as well to manage this.
I do a lot of zone training, heartbeat zone training, to sit in those areas, because otherwise, when you're off on your own, suddenly the birds and what's happening, and did you see that, and you suddenly slow it down. So if you've got a watch keeping track of what zone you're in and keeping you in that zone, that actually is really important to your training. It focuses you to do that.
This is my second Sarah Sup Junkie question here, second and final here. So would you say that SUP 12 is primarily a physical or a mental challenge?
I think to anyone who's never paddled 12 hours before, it's a physical challenge. Anyone who's paddled 12 hours before will realize actually where the mind comes in. And the mind for this will be that focus of achieving the most amount of laps. And we've put benchmarks in for people, so to obviously do a lap an hour to get 12 laps in is a gold standard. But can you get more than that? Can you get 16 in? Can you get 20 in? The focus of trying to do 2, so 24, would be a big focus to achieve. And that's where the mind comes in, because we can all be motivated for the first 2 or 3 hours. It's after that the focus of the mind, even though the body is still willing, do you really want to do it? Do you want to push yourself there? Because you don't have to. You can have that break if you want. But of course, everyone else, what are they doing? And that's why it's so important that we've got the screens, so everybody can see exactly how many laps everybody are on. Because the real key, I think, spectator aspect will be, and I hope this happens, that there are 2 or 3 people who have done, let's say, 24 laps when the hooter goes, and they're all on that lap. And whoever it is on that last lap, if they've done the same amount of laps, it turns into a race. And that final lap then is a total race. And whoever comes in first of those people who have done equal amount of laps is the SUP 12 champion.
Incredible. And I mean, there's so much strategy and tactics, and obviously adaptations on the day as well, because inevitably, as you said, conditions will change, particularly with the winds if it's nice and sunny. So we talked a bit about the rules around eating zones and rest zones. Are there any other rules that competitors should be aware of?
You're only allowed one board, so you have to choose your board wisely. And I think that in itself can be incredibly tactical, because are you going for a slightly bigger board for more stability when you start to get tired later on? Are you going full on race board for the whole time? And then there are lots of people who are just coming because they just want to give it a go, because they want to do laps like this where we've got boats and lifeguards and people watching you, and you're going to be safe, and they want to just get out there and do it. And that for some is a great draw. They have no intention of winning, but they have every intention of trying to do 12 laps. And I love that. I love that people set themselves challenges within what we're trying to do.
Absolutely. It's the skills and the stamina, but particularly around the skills. And we talked about this in our episodes as well. You can't get that without spending time on the water. And I can't think of any better value than 12 hours plus of entertainment, fully shepherded by safety boats and so on, just exposing yourself to different conditions. So, yeah, as you say, even if you're not racing, you'll get a huge amount out of the event, and obviously spend a lot of time with like-minded people. So we talked about that, obviously great value for 12 hours on the water. As a competitor, what else would you get for your entry fee?
So of course you've got all the safety stuff, etc. You've got everyone gets a technical tee to wear, obviously to compete in, but you obviously get to keep that. Everybody will get their specific medal to finish, and that will be color coordinated with how many laps you've done. So like I say, if you can get that gold standard of 1 lap an hour, you'll get the gold medal, and upwards right up to the Neptune medal. And then at the end of the day, we all go back to the rugby club, because the rugby club is a 7-iron from where we're competing, and there's a pasty and a pint for everybody that's competed as well. So I want to create just a really inclusive environment for everybody to come and have a paddle. And for me, as an adventure paddle, this is something that most people don't see, is that, and you hit on it, which was that change of how our waters change from 7 in the morning till 7 at night is a thing to see and experience, as well as race. And what's lovely, Greg, who runs the Last Paddler Standing event over in Florida, will give, and this is first time anyone has heard this, will give a free place to participate in Last Paddler Standing in Florida in December to the person who wins SUP 12.
Wow, that's fantastic. What a spectacular additional bonus prize there. So sounds like this will be a great test. It will be a great experience and a huge lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to joining you down there, Brendon, with Sarah Thornley on the stream, where we'll be attempting to talk for 12 hours, or at least sort of fairly close to it. And obviously it will give us the chance to tell the stories of people who are competing, and effectively a 12-hour podcast. So thanks, Brendon, for joining us. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you at the start of April. And the link to enter and the link to the stream are in the show notes of this episode. And if you're not able to join us in person, then please tune in and follow the stream as it goes out on Saturday, the 1st of April, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at Greenwich Mean Time. Thanks, Brendon. Thanks for your time. Great to see you again, and see you soon.
Awesome, Simon. Always a pleasure to talk to you, buddy. Take care.